Hey, Dr. Gila here. Just like for a lot of you, summer in my world means things look a little bit different. And so I'm practicing what I preach, as it were, and taking a little bit of time off from recording new podcast episodes. Instead, I've decided to air replays of some of my most popular episodes. These are the ones that seem to really resonate with all of you, and for good reason. These are all topics that are so universal and so important, and so I hope a refresh and a re-listen will be really helpful for you over the summer. I also want to mention that if things are feeling hard and you have a lot of meltdowns in your home, I do have a free printable guide that walks you through my simple visual metaphor to help you understand why you and your kids have a hard time, lose it, snap, all of those fun things, and an acronym to help you remember the 7 main categories of things that can contribute to those big meltdowns and other tough episodes. Go to parentingwithconnection.com/guide. I'll also put the link in the show notes for you. All right, now on to the show. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Gila, and today I'm joined by Dr. Emily King. She is a child psychologist and a former school psychologist with specialty experience with neurodivergent children and teens. She's writing a book called The Neurodivergent Learner, available for pre-order already. And she also is the creator of the Neurodiverse Classroom, which is a professional development curriculum for educators. In other words, she knows what she's talking about when it comes to neurodivergent learners. So I asked her to come on the podcast. We're going to chat about how to support your neurodivergent learner, both in school and also at home. Her particular expertise is with working with autistic kids, ADHD kids, and twice exceptional kids. But I think there's something in here for everyone. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Single Parenting with Connection, Not Perfection, the podcast that honors your messy reality. It's the support you crave without the usual emotional landmines. I'm your host, Dr. Gila, and I promise I will never tell you to just tag your partner in. Before we start, quick reminder. While I am a licensed psychologist and a certified coach, this podcast is not coaching and it's not therapy and it's not a replacement for medical or psychological advice. It is for educational and informational purposes only. All right, let's dive in. Emily, welcome. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I wanted to focus today on neurodivergent learners. I know that's one of your major expertise. You were a school psychologist and a child psychologist, and you have an upcoming book all about this.
I do, coming out August 25th.
Amazing. And I think you mentioned specifically you focus on autism, ADHD, and twice exceptionality. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. What do you think parents of kids with these diagnoses need to know in terms of their child succeeding in school and maybe also supporting them at home? But let's start with school.
Yeah, so I always start with this, systems level viewpoint of we test and diagnose kids truly based on a medical model. And
Yep.
then we try to fit them into this educational system, which is
Hmm.
also pretty much designed on a medical model. Like we're going to teach everybody the same thing. And if it's not working, we're going to do this different program called special education. And then it should work. And it's like
Yeah.
this or that, general ed or special ed. So we have to understand the system doesn't really work that well for a dynamic learner, like a learner who is going to have uneven development. Like, autistic learners have these wonderful strengths in some areas and then a great need for support in other areas. And definitely, especially a twice exceptional, like a child that's intellectually gifted and has ADHD. They're going to have very uneven development that's not going to fit nicely into, let's say, a third grade curriculum. So the
Right.
first thing just to know is that your child is not broken. There's a misalignment here with how we've created education to be over the last 100 years. And I think we're in the middle of like a movement, honestly, to figure out when, most kids do, neurotypical learners will be able to learn and do learn in a group learning setting that is categorized by ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
But neurodivergent learners are really, I always say they're on their own path, right? Like if you're parenting a kid, you know, like I've got to follow these interests or follow this attention span, because that's where the engagement is for learning. And you know that that doesn't always align with what's going
Mm-hmm.
on at school. So just know that it's hard, not because you're doing it wrong. It is just
Yeah.
it's just challenging. And
Yeah.
then once we get closer to like the school level, that's kind of like the system level. And then the school level is trying to figure out, you know, the system around IEPs and 504s and how you're going to get your child the services that they need really on paper and in reality. But then
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, it's the teacher level of really making sure that you are figuring out how to collaborate and communicate with your child's teacher. And it gets a little more challenging as they get older and they have multiple teachers and you're trying to help them, you know, learn how to email a teacher or speak up in class. So we could go in many different directions with different
Yeah.
levels of schooling. But if you think about it in those three, like systems level, school level, and then just think about, you know, my child and their relationship with their teacher in this classroom, that's a good place to start for setting the stage for
Mm-hmm.
success. Because at the end of the day, what I want all parents to know is that success is not achievement. We are born and
Mm.
bred on this idea that academic achievement is success. And you and I both know as mental health professionals that, I mean, in my opinion, mental wellness, authenticity,
Yeah.
you know, joy, these are things that are success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've just seen so many children who are high achievers and not mentally well,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And also
Um,
achievement sort of is in some ways antithetical to the whole growth mindset thing. It's
right,
sort of this like you've accomplished it, you've checked it off checked the
right.
box, and it's not this like acknowledging that sort of continuity of learning and that we're
Yeah.
always growing.
We're
Yeah.
always learning and always growing. And I'm sure everyone listening, when I talk to parents and teachers, they're like, oh, yeah, that's how I thought about it in school or how I was treated. And I turned into a
Mm-hmm.
perfectionist and a people pleaser. And then I forgot everything I learned about that math class or that history
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I always also just want to challenge everyone to really follow your kids' interest, follow your kids' attention span and engagement.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to lead to their success, and it is not going to be linear by any
Mm-hmm.
means. Um, but that's what I want parents to know starting out.
Yeah, yeah. I want to go back for a minute. There's so many things I want to follow up on that you just said. I want to go back to the very beginning where you're talking about the medical model, because I know we
Hmm.
sort of throw that term out a lot. And
Sure.
I do think it's important to name, and a lot of parents might not really know, like,
Hmm.
well, what are the downfalls and what do we mean by that? You know, so one thing that I think of, first of all, these diagnoses they're boxes, right? We're
Hmm.
putting kids
Hmm.
in humans, not just kids, adults also in boxes, and they're boxes that are really defined by deficits,
Yeah.
right? And what I'm hearing you say is that another really big piece of this, a potential drawback, is that they're also kind of one-dimensional in some ways,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
you lose a lot of, you mentioned dynamic.
Hmm.
Can you say more about the dynamic piece that and the non-unidimensionality of it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so this I feel like is the most obvious when we talk about autism,
Mm-hmm.
simply because there's so much about the world from a sensory perspective that influences our ability to attend, connect, engage, and then learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's true for all of us, but in all my years working with autistic children and teens and adults, it's so obvious that they cannot learn without it
Mm-hmm.
being relevant to them, without them feeling safe in the environment, without them feeling connected and understood and heard by the people around them. Like it's not a like I won't learn that way. It's like I can't learn that way. So that sends
Yeah.
us on this path to thinking about how dynamic our nervous system is. So
Mm-hmm.
when we think about the medical model, the most extreme example I always think about is just orthopedics, right? Like our child breaks their arm and there's a diagnosis of a broken arm, and then someone has the skills to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to heal, and it's a fairly linear path to like problem solve, treatment, healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we think about child development, first of all, we can globally talk about, our child growing on the growth curve and our child gaining skills through over time with development. Yes, those are all generally follow some sort of linear path. But when you really get down to the day to day, of raising a child, of watching. I work with parents all the time, and sometimes teachers, and they're like, "They had it yesterday. Where did it
Yeah.
go?"
Yeah.
They totally were able to do that. Well, they may feel tired today. They may be getting sick. They may be constipated. They may be sad
Yeah.
about something. So all of those emotional and sensory experiences that affect our nervous system create that dynamic movement of development that you just can't fit nicely into a medical model.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, if I can nerd out on the history of our education system too, but it's very much paralleled with we have this group of young people. We want to, I mean, it all started when we wanted kids to be able to read, right? So we want to teach everybody to read and do math. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of that gets complicated with the cultural context of it because there were moments in our history where we didn't want kids to work, and then some families needed their kids to work. So like
Yeah.
there's all different types of cultural and social differences that have happened that have influenced education, that's a little different than medicine, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes back to there's absolutely no one thing that is going to fix. Like we do the same thing to fix a broken arm.
Mm-hmm.
And generally speaking,
For every
I'm
kid,
not an
right?
orthopedist, but generally speaking, there is a plan to follow. There's a best
Yeah.
practices, and we do our best, of course, in psychology to have best practices, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where clinical judgment comes in and relationship. And I know educators feel this way too. Like they're trained to teach the curriculum. And this is why I do so much professional development with educators. I'm not there to teach them how to teach the curriculum. That's what they go to school for, right?
Yeah.
I need them to understand the social and emotional needs of these kids. And if they are not feeling safe and connected, they're not open to new
Yeah.
learning.
Yeah.
It's the same as parents.
Yeah.
We know when our kid is shut down and our words are not getting in.
Yeah, if you can't reach them, you can't teach them,
Right,
right?
right.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it is a helpful message for parents to remember also because it's not just true for math and reading, it's also true for like, well, my kid is normally fine going grocery shopping with me, and today they're a hot mess and I can't get
Yep,
them to do anything, right? And
yep.
so, or even tying shoelaces or,
Yes.
various from soft skills to hard skills that it isn't linear. Like you said, it's not
Mm-hmm.
they can do it a little bit today and a little more tomorrow and a little more tomorrow, and then they
Mm-hmm.
master it, and then they're done mastering it and they never have problems with it again. It's not like that, really, I think for any kid, but even more so for
Hmm.
neurodivergent kids. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so, and the context, it's all happening in a context, and it's important to take into account that sort of bigger picture.
yeah, absolutely. And what you just said about the skills that, are variable, like they were able to go to the grocery store yesterday, why can't they handle it
Yeah.
today? I call that the learning circle, which is I write about in my book, but basically I think it all helps us as parents to like have at least have some categories in our head when things feel so all over the place. But I think of those skills as like not mastered at all. Like we're not even going to ask our kid to do that thing. And it might be like, a very young child cooking on the stove. Like we're not even
Yeah.
going to, they're not even developmentally there yet. We're not doing
Yeah.
that. And then there's mastered on the other side of the, spectrum where it's like, even when my kid is sick or tired, they can do this thing. So like an older child being able to get dressed to go to the doctor. They
Mm-hmm.
can still get dressed even though they feel really terrible. But probably a 4 or 5-year-old feels really terrible. You might have to get them dressed because they might
Mm-hmm.
regress in their skills, not feeling well. And then like everything else is in the middle, and it's a learning circle where it's like, if everything's going well, they can do the thing. But if something's off, especially with sleep and food and mood and, all the things that throw us off as humans,
Yeah.
we're going to see some regression with skills that is temporary. I know we saw it a lot over COVID,
Mm-hmm.
which was so interesting to see, like lots of sleep regression, some toileting regression, that in my practice at least, kids recovered from that, but it was fascinating to watch because it's not unheard of at all that when things are stressful, we regress in some of our
Yeah.
skills, and that's the same thing is true for kids.
Yeah, and since this is a podcast for single parents,
Yeah.
right, the stress can sometimes be parents are getting divorced or
Mhm.
parents are arguing or, something going on in the family unit, some transition, some
Yeah.
change. Yeah. Also, emotion regulation is, I think, like a skill that we don't often think of as a skill that this absolutely applies to. One thing that's coming through in what you're saying is the lens that we talk about a lot on this podcast that when kids are not doing something well or having really challenging behaviors, that it is them struggling, that
Mhm.
they're having a hard time and that it's coming from someplace, right? There's other things that are contributing to that. And certainly, it sounds like from what you're saying, this absolutely applies to school also, to the
Yeah.
academic piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you have family transitions that I know many of your listeners do, it's if you're wondering, like, is this a good time for me to teach my child a new skill? It may not be, is
Mhm.
this a time for me to stay really consistent in all the things that I can? Probably, like if
Mhm.
there are going to be variables in life transitions, family transitions that you can't control. But
Mhm.
when we think about school, so school is actually very routine and
Yeah.
very predictable. Well, once we've gotten past all the snow days in the wintertime,
Right.
that is definitely, not predictable.
Yeah, it doesn't feel
That's a
very
whole
predictable
nother
right now.
podcast to talk about how that throws off neurodivergent learners.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
generally speaking, they go at the same time every day. They go every day. The schedule within school is very consistent. And so often it's really helpful to talk to your child's teacher if you're in a family transition and say, look, things are pretty unpredictable. My stress is a little higher. I, I mean, kids feel it, right? It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
we don't talk about it in front of them. Kids feel our stress. And
Yeah.
so bringing a teacher in to that circle of trust, basically, of like, please let me know if you see anything new from my kid because we could have a behavior regression of some kind during this time that wouldn't
Yeah.
be out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
But just to let teachers know that you're doing your best and
Yeah.
it's something that you're navigating, and
Yeah.
you'll get through it.
Yeah, and that really kind of reminds and invites them into that compassionate lens
Yeah.
of if something is coming up at school, now I remember that it's not just about school, there's also other things.
Mhm.
And it gives them that useful context to
Yeah.
bring. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because I talk to educators a lot who are like, this behavior came out of nowhere. And
Yeah.
in my experience, there is no nowhere. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
always somewhere. We
Yep.
just don't know it. And
Yep.
we have to talk to each other. And I do think sometimes parents will feel embarrassed if their child is doing something, or especially we can, if our child is aggressive at school, we can feel horrible
Yeah.
about that and feel responsible. But if if there are things going on that are beyond your control in terms of their emotional dysregulation, you've just got a all hands on deck situation and loop in all the educators you can to help with some of those
Yeah.
situations, because your child will need, especially as in single parenting, your child will need other relationships at times,
Mm-hmm.
especially as they get older, whether those are teachers or coaches, counselors at school. who are those consistent people to check in because,
Yeah.
I hate the cliche, it's a village, but it's a village.
It's a village. You need, yeah, you deserve a village, I
You
like to
deserve a
say.
village, and
Yeah.
oftentimes educators are part of that. I mean, it has been
Yeah.
for us.
And the other thing I like to remind parents often is that, because you were saying, it might not be the time to work on XYZ or to teach them XYZ. And I think it's really important to remind yourself that this is a moment, this is a phase, and it doesn't mean you're letting go of that goal forever. It
Right.
means that right now they need a little bit more support and a little
Mhm.
like slower of a learning process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've got to think about this is true for us and for our kids. Think about our capacity to learn,
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
capacity to gain skills. This goes back to the regression we see sometimes when when our kids are stressed. But if you think about it, flip it the other way. I'll often talk with families about teaching certain skills in the summer because their capacity is just more open. They have more energy. You're not
Hmm.
in a rush to get out the door. So, let's work on tying shoes in July.
Mm-hmm.
So when maybe something is less stressful, or you know your life, you know the seasons of your life, and yes, like there's something that maybe you are helping your kid with shoes every single morning, and you're feeling guilty because they can learn it, but you're just trying to get out the door and you're keeping it all together, they will learn it. They will learn it
Mm-hmm.
at some time. And usually, if they need direct teaching with a skill, you just have to think about when do I have the capacity to sit and be with them?
Yeah.
And it's not just the time, it's the capacity, right?
Yes.
We can have time,
Yep.
but we can be exhausted.
Yeah.
So often I will always talk to parents about carving out mornings on the weekend when we're rested and we have, time to connect and work on something. And then in the summer or during breaks, it's a great time to work on new skills then.
Yeah, so important, right? Not just the child's capacity, but your capacity. So
Oh, yes.
maybe on the way to school, on the way out the door to school is not the time to teach them to tie their shoelaces,
Which is
right?
when they're tying their shoes. So
Right.
we're going off on a tying shoes tangent, but it's just an example. Like it makes sense to teach your kid the thing when they do it in the routine, but
Yeah.
often that's not when we have the capacity to
Yeah.
teach or to learn.
Yeah.
And so we just really have to flip that on its side and be like, okay, I really want them to learn this skill, but we are a hot mess in this transition and it is not
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
So really just think when can we have a tutorial about this
Mm-hmm.
later?
Yeah. And I have to say, a lesson that I have learned over and over, I think I will keep learning it over and over in my parenting, is when my child is not ready to learn a skill, it is so hard. And when he is ready, it's like that.
It
I mean,
clicks.
it's amazing.
It clicks.
So, yeah, do you have any tips for parents on how to gauge readiness and what to do if you're getting concerned that your child isn't ready for a skill, but how to know when to worry?
Yeah. So the first thing that I always tell parents is to see if your kid can do it when you're not there.
Mm,
So, for instance, we can continue with the tying shoes, or it could be putting on a jacket. So, like,
yeah.
for instance, if your kid every morning is like, I don't want to put on the jacket, or I can't put on the jacket, and then you talk to their teacher and they put that jacket on by themselves every day before recess, and
Mm,
the teacher has never known that it was an issue at home because they're just used to everyone putting their jacket on, so they may have never mentioned it to you. So I always say teachers don't know something is an emerging skill if they always see your kid do it. But it is an
mm,
emerging skill if they're doing it at school and not doing it at home because they can do it. They just can't do it across settings.
mm-hmm,
So the first thing would be, is anybody in your life ever seen your child do that thing? Whether
mm-hmm,
it is at grandma's house or at, school, or you've maybe seen it, but it's not consistent at all. Because if no one has ever seen your child do that thing, it's not emerging yet.
mm,
And if they are, of course, if they're like melting down about it, really frustrated, then we need to pull back and slow down. Usually
mm-hmm,
it can be a pacing problem, or it can be not enough practice. So we just need to slow down and teach. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think that it can be frustrating for many parents who grew up in homes where you're just expected to know how to do it because it's what
Yeah.
everybody's doing. Through my lens as a psychologist working with neurodivergent learners, there are many tasks that we have to explicitly teach. This happens too a lot with ADHD because it's not a skill weakness, it's an attention weakness.
Mm.
So we have to carve out time to do it. We have to make steps visual. We
Mm-hmm.
have to like rinse and repeat and practice doing things, kind of getting it on autopilot so you can almost do it while you get distracted. And so
Mm-hmm.
there are different ways to think about teaching, but number one, of course, is if you've never seen them do it, then it's probably not emerging. Once it's emerging, it's figuring out the pattern, figuring
Mm-hmm.
out when can they do it, and why is it working in that
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Mm-hmm.
It could be working at school because they're looking around and everybody's doing it, and they have all these peer models for what to
Right.
do. And they may not have that, especially if they're an only child, they may not have that at home. But if the teacher's like, oh, yeah, they're looking around to see what they're supposed to do and they just do it, then what I would suggest in that situation is you get your coats on together side by side every morning and model it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of figure out what works by talking to other adults in your child's life. Um, but yes, there, will be a time where you have that gut feeling of they hate doing this. I'm getting nothing but resistance and just emotional dysregulation.
Mm-hmm.
So slowing down and
Mm-hmm.
observing
Mm-hmm.
is the next thing to do because you're kind of figuring out when can they do it, which is
Mm-hmm.
also another thing that is opposite from the medical model. The medical model is defining the problem. You know the problem. You have arrived at the problem when your child is upset, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to start investigating when can they do something. And if you've never seen them be able to do it, they're not ready yet developmentally. But
And
if
so
they,
does that mean you
yeah.
hold off and sort of wait until you see signs of readiness, or do you work on it to get them ready? Or
Yeah, I
it
think
probably
either one.
depends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it depends, but I think either one. So I absolutely think kids, obviously, I believe kids can learn things. They may
Yeah.
need explicit teaching,
Yeah.
which when I say they're not ready, it could mean that they're not ready to learn that just by someone telling them what to do. They may
Mm-hmm.
need step-by-step visuals. They may need a modeled description of it.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes that becomes clear once you talk to their teacher,
Yeah.
and you realize that, oh, they're not doing that at school either. But if you're like taking the jacket example, if your kid has the motor skills to do that, they're okay transitioning and they just, need some step-by-step directions because maybe they're standing at their cubby looking off and getting
Yeah.
distracted, then that's the skill weakness, that it's
Yeah.
not a motor issue, it's not a motivation, they want to go outside, it's they're not focused to do it enough, or what, for example, that could be one
Yeah, and
example.
one like big picture message that I'm hearing, which totally makes sense, is that things that we think of as a skill are actually a bunch of skills, right? It
Yes.
requires like
Yes.
so many things. And for some kids, like there are skills that you just sort of take for granted that people just kind of learn and
Absolutely.
know how to do. I very vividly remember suddenly realizing that I hadn't explicitly taught my child how to wash his hair. And like you just kind of assume like that's just sort of it's not something you remember learning.
Like,
You
I
just
don't remember
kind of
anybody teaching me
right,
that.
you just kind of always knew. And I sort of had this moment of like, "Oh, no, I need to explain certain things about this and then he'll know how to do it."
Hmm.
And I think there's a lot of things that we parents sort of forget. We take for granted that it comes so naturally
Hmm.
to us and also maybe to some neurotypical kids that the neurodivergent child might need a little more explicit instruction with.
Right. I mean, if you're a parent listening who has an autistic child and a non-autistic child, this is one of the biggest thing or the most drastic things to notice is the ease with which a child's social skills develop
Hmm.
versus how hard it is for many autistic children to notice what to do, notice what to say, try to enter into a situation, try
Yeah.
to stay on topic. It is so incredibly hard for them,
Yeah.
and it just flows with a child who is not autistic, and
Yeah.
those social nuances, they just pick them up. The pragmatic language, which is just, the social use of like what someone meant instead of what they explicitly said, like those
Mm-hmm.
things just develop. And I have that experience as a parent in my family, and it is amazing to watch the kid with more social skills that come at ease. It's like, whoa, like I didn't have to teach him any of that. And then
Yeah.
I've got this other kid who was like an early reader, and I didn't have to teach him any of that. And it's just like,
Yeah.
they're all so different, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, so the child who might need a little more explicit social instruction might
Mhm.
also be the child who picks up other skills that you wouldn't
Yeah.
expect them to without. Yeah. Right. So there's so much else we could talk about, but I know we're getting low on time. So you're just going to all have to buy her book.
Yeah.
Uh, and before we get to the end questions, I know you had mentioned, so obviously if your child is in school, having that open line of communication with the teacher is so important, and giving them that added context. Is there any, I know that this is a huge topic, but is there any like one piece of advice that you would give parents whose kids are struggling in school? Maybe the school isn't at this point really accommodating or meeting their child's needs as best as they can.
Oh, I always say start with the teacher because there is often so much the teacher can do. However, if you feel like your teacher doesn't have the background, doesn't have the training to understand your child, and some general education teachers do not.
Yeah.
We do have discrepancies and things that could be much better about teacher training programs. My guess is that you may have a special educator in your life, or there are often school administrators who are like previously worked as special educators. So
Mm,
finding people within your school community that you can bring into those meetings specifically, you are allowed to ask, like, I want this assistant principal to come to our meeting rather than that one.
mm,
It depends on the school, but I have, encouraged families to do that because you can I always tell, I feel this myself and you may as well. Like, I went to grad school. I'm a licensed professional, but so much of what I learned is from my lived experience. And every time
mm-hmm.
a parent says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we got this teacher because she has a kid with ADHD," or
Yeah.
that kind of thing. I wish we didn't have to have that reality, but it is true
Mm-hmm.
that if you've lived it, you get it, right?
Thousand
So if you
percent.
can
Yes.
find the people in your school community, it could be the school counselor, it could be, I mean, it often is the special educator who you can loop into some of those conversations. That can sometimes help when you're being
Mm-hmm.
met with resistance, or um, you're being met with a teacher who may not fully understand that your child is both bright and needs support in another
Mm-hmm.
area. That's a common question I get. And so it's
Yes.
just finding that person to also be on your team and be the bridge between you and the school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And really also that speaks to me of trusting your instinct that
Hmm.
there is something missing, right? Like just because someone is
Yeah.
a particular kind of specialist doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what's going on for your kid. And if you're
Hmm.
feeling that disconnect, to
Hmm.
trust that and give yourself permission to reach out for other support to supplement
Yeah,
it.
and some parents will, collaborate with like an advocate outside of school,
Yeah.
or their child's therapists outside of school to run something by them. Like, does this sound right? Is this, how it works? And it-
Yeah.
most neurodivergent learners have an occupational therapist or a speech language pathologist that works with them, who've, all these professionals have school experience and have usually done like trainings in schools and early in their career. So they'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to guide you.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I warned you ahead of time, but I ask every guest that I have on the podcast two questions. So one of them, this is a podcast about parenting with connection, not perfection. And I'd love to hear, what is something that you do that fosters connection in your life, whether it's with yourself, with a kid in your life?
So with myself, it would be related to music and nature. So
Mm,
in my book, I do talk a lot about the things that regulate us, and for me, those are my choices. So I love singing and I love teaching myself songs on the piano. I'm not,
Oh.
like super great, but
But you enjoy it.
it's not the output that matters, it's the experience. But I
Yes.
absolutely love music and adding that into my life. And then like hiking and walking is, just being outside in
Yeah.
nature. And then with my kids, it's games. So that's the one thing I feel like we as a as a family, as like that in that parent-child relationship,
Yeah.
even though they grow older, the games can change, but
Uh-huh.
just everybody getting off their screens and playing a card game or playing, sometimes it's on screens. Like we love all the word games,
Uh-huh.
like the New York Times word
The
games and
Wordle and stuff.
and, and
Yeah.
all those things. So we have daily like battles of who can
Yeah.
get that the fastest and things like that. So that's how we get
Yeah.
connection kind of on a daily basis.
I love it. We love games here too. We just discovered Azul. I don't know if you've ever played that.
Mm-mm.
No, it's a fun one. And someplace in your life that you have embraced imperfection.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be with my stumbling into learning how to play the piano again. So it's
I love
something
that.
that so I, took piano lessons until 8th grade and then convinced my mom to let me quit when I went to high school. And I ended up doing like theater and choir, and so I was continuing on with music, but later in my life, I just was like, I wonder if I could still do it. And I absolutely am what I call a recovering perfectionist, high achieving student, people
Yeah.
pleaser. And
Yeah.
and so I do wonder if I like didn't stick with it because I felt like I was better at other things. And
Yeah.
so the older I get, the more I'm like, who cares, right? Like I enjoy figuring out the chords to a song and just messing around with it. And I think my younger self wouldn't have been okay with all those imperfections.
Yeah, I love that. And as an invitation to parents listening, right? Like it's modeling for your kids that
Yeah,
you're doing something that you're not a virtuoso in, but you're
right. It's
still
just
able
for
to enjoy
fun.
it. Yeah, I love that. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. If folks do want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
If people want to keep learning with me, like I say, is all my info, blogs, and parent workshops. I do monthly parent workshops on Substack. So you would go to learnwithdremily.substack.com. And I'm going to create a code for all the listeners for a free month on Substack. And that would get
Awesome.
you 30 days of just being able to watch any of the videos, the replays of the workshops in the archive. And I will make sure you have a link to that. And then,
Yes, I will link to all of it in the show notes. That's
yeah. And
so
then,
generous. Thank
of
you.
course, my first book, The Neurodivergent Learner, is going to be out August 25th. And it actually is available now for pre order anywhere books are sold.
Amazing. And so exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big deal. I'm excited to see it. All right. Well, thank you so much. So lovely to chat with you. I'm sure we could have chatted for hours more. Maybe I'll have to have you back.
I'd love it.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me.
That's it for this episode. I am so glad you found your way here. And remember, even if you're on your own, you don't have to do it alone. You've got this.